Welcome back, guys, to Rolling with Carlos. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about the Miami Dolphins soft culture. Does it really begin with Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, or does it really begin with Stephen Ross, the owner? Yes, he does want a championship in Miami. He basically writes an open book, has an open check to write for any players that coaches have wanted here and that Mike McDaniel and current GM Chris Greer want. But is the culture problem not stemming only from Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer? Does it stem and begin from the owner himself, even though he wants to bring a championship to Miami? Does it begin with Stephen Ross? That's the question I'm going to pose to you guys today, and that's the question I'm going to try to provide proof for, because he's been owner of the Dolphins for 16 years, and we have not won a playoff game in over 25 years. And he's had roughly 8 coaches since Don Shula retired. May the great Don Shula rest in peace. But he's had about 8 coaches, and nothing has worked out. Guys, Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer are basically on their last year, the last straw. If this doesn't work in 2025 in the football year, a rebuild is going to come, because 2 squeaks into the playoff doesn't actually say that we are a playoff contending, Super Bowl contending team. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into this video of the question: is Stephen Ross one of the main problems of the soft culture in Miami, and that he has not decided to bring a president of baseball operations, except for one time where he brought Bill Parcells. But Bill Parcells pretty much got ran out of the building. And Stephen Ross may be the actual problem to this franchise being mediocre. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll go ahead and read some articles. Then I'm going to go ahead and play you the press conference of Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, and then give you my thoughts at the end. But I really think Stephen Ross is the main reason that the Miami Dolphins have been mediocre for the past 16 years since he's owned the team, and the past 25 years, the other 9 years, it's because ownership didn't really care to bring a championship to Miami. But let me go ahead and read you some articles and read you some statements that I got from Twitter also. So give me a second, ladies and gentlemen. The first glaring thing that I'm going to read you came from Barry Jackson from the Miami Herald, where he goes, "Where are the consequences for anything? It's one thing to empower your employees. It's another to allow them to go unsupervised when they haven't earned the trust of full autonomy. Is Ross not paying enough attention, or is he the most forgiving man on earth? This 6-year Dolphins rebuild was a failure. It's time for Stephen Ross to demand more and stop forgiving the unforgivable. 6 things that must happen now." And Tyreek suggests he wants out, and more players' reactions tonight. All right, guys, I'm going to click on the link and read his article that he suggests. The article from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. "Ross keeps McDaniel Greer, but time for him to demand more and more conclusions and reaction. Six things that must happen now after another wasted Dolphin season, one that ended with a 32-20 stinker of a loss at the Jets, and stretched their league high streak without a playoff win 24 years. Owner Stephen Ross needs to demand more, even if it means occasionally meddling. But Ross nevertheless announced Sunday that he's retaining Chris Greer as general manager and Mike McDaniel as coach. Aside from the Cowboys' Jerry Jones, there has been no more patient NFL owner than Ross in recent years, and it's not fully warranted. he has repeatedly given the front office a mulligan of missteps that are unforgivable. For Ross, no mistake has seemed too big to cost the GM his job. Drafting Charles Harris ahead of TJ Watt. Let's reward Grier by giving him more power. This really happened. Signing the wrong quarterback for the tank, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Let's have the guy make that decision. Grier oversees the rebuild. Ross assuredly knew the Dolphins roster lacked the physicality and toughness to compete with Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore. And yet, he sat and watched Grier and coach Mike McDaniel sign no replacement whatsoever for a Pro Bowl caliber guard, Robert Hunt, while signing retards Benito Jones and Neville Gallimore, Jonathan Harris, and Tart to replace Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis before Calais Campbell was added in May only because he took $2 million. Ross knew that Bradley Chubb would miss most or all of the season and didn't say a word when the Dolphins allowed Andrew Van Ginkel, that had 11.5 sacks, leave for Minnesota with no offer on the table. Ross suggested the Dolphins draft Lamar Jackson and watch his GM ignore him and take Minkah Fitzpatrick, and says simply, "Oh well." Ross, general manager and coach, tell him it's a good idea to commit $212 million, including $167 million guaranteed, to a quarterback who has stayed healthy exactly 1 year in his life. Ross didn't bat an eye. Where are the consequences for anything? Who exactly is looking out for the best interests of the franchise? It's one thing to empower employees. It's another to allow them to go unsupervised when they haven't even earned the trust of full autonomy. Is Ross, 84, not paying enough attention, or is he the most forgiving owner on earth? Ross hasn't been available for interviews this decade, aside from the press conference introducing McDaniel as coach. But he owes the public an explanation, just as other owners do, just as the Patriots owner Robert Kraft will do with Boston media at 1 p.m. Monday after making a coaching change. Instead, Ross offered only a statement in announcing that he is retraining Grier and McDaniel. As we now look toward 2025, our football operations will continue to be led by Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel with my full support. Their positive working relationship is an asset to the Dolphins, and I believe in the value of stability. However, continuity and leadership is not to be confused with the acceptance that the status quo is good enough. We will take a hard look at where we have fallen short and make the necessary changes to deliver the ultimate goal of building and sustaining a winning team that competes for championships. Though Tyler Huntley told me that the Dolphins have informed his agent they want to keep him, he simply cannot be the number 2 going into next season. Certainly not after Sunday's debacle, featuring some widely inaccurate throws, 2 interceptions, and a 6.8 passer rating. Cold and slick ball played a big factor, Huntley said in his play. The Jets had a nice little plan for us. The Dolphins need to sign one of these backups in March, Andy Dalton, whom they called Carolina after Tua Tagovailoa's concussion, Justin Fields, James Winston, Russell Wilson, or perhaps Jimmy Garoppolo, or trade for an established backup who becomes available. Other free agent options: Mac Jones, Joe Flacco, Mason Rudolph, Joshua Dobbs, Marcus Mariota, Drew Lock, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Derek Stidham, Cooper Rush, and Carson Wentz. Finding dominating, proven moving guards must be a priority on day one of free agency. And sign or draft better run blocking tight ends that complement pass catching wizard Jonnu Smith. You don't need to break the bank on two guards, but you need to be willing to spend significant money on one and decent money on another. This front office cannot be trusted to even find effective bargains in the interior line. No third-day Dolphins offensive line draft pick has become a good player in this century. Meanwhile, the blocking at tight end hasn't been nearly as effective as coaches would have you to believe. Among 75 qualifying tight ends, Pro Football Focus said Smith has been the third worst run blocker and Julian Hill the sixth worst run blocker. Entering Sunday, Hill had blocked 273 runs and Smith 117. Beg Calais Campbell to come back if he wants to keep playing. With no cap space and more than a dozen needs, it's going to be tricky to spend big money on a player to line up opposite Zach Zealer if Campbell is willing to come back for a decent raise for the $2 million salary this season. Don't blink an eye. Campbell, 38, said he will decide his future in March and would consider the Dolphins. I haven't made my decision if this is my last game, he said Sunday evening. I've got to really decide if I want to go through the process again. It's a lot. I just don't want to be a guy out there. I want to be a difference maker. Re-signing Tyler Dotson to play inside linebacker alongside Jordan Brooks, find a better nose tackle than Benito Jones, and find two new starting safeties unless Javon Holland is willing to take a well below market value, which seems unlikely. For McDaniel, go in the lab and find a way to incorporate the vertical passing game into your offense. What's the point of stomaching $38 million in the cap charges for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in 2025 if you cannot maximize them? Instead, simply throw your hands up in the air when teams play two high safeties. And let's be clear, one of the coercive impacts of the Dolphins neglecting their offensive line this past spring was not trusting their quarterbacks to have the time to throw deep anymore, which resulted in a underuse of Hill, who suggested afterwards he wants to out after finishing with less than 1,000 receiving yards for only the second time in his career. There's a lot of things that I need to reassess about my career, Hill said Sunday evening, just to see what I want to do, continue to get better as a player so I can continue to reach 1,000-yard mark. It stinks when QB1 is missing. I've got to do what's best for me and my family, whether that's here or wherever the case may be. I'm opening the door. I'm out, bro. It was great playing here, but at the end of the day, I've got to do what's best for my career. I'm too much of a competitor to just be out there. McDaniel and coaches, not the medical staff, told that Hill was unavailable in the fourth quarter, but he's not sure why. There you see the thoughts of Barry Jackson and what's going on with the soft culture in terms of the Miami Dolphins. And I'm going to go ahead and also read to you guys article from Omar Kelly, which was on January 10th, 6 days ago, and that his opinion that this is basically a Ross problem and not only a McDaniel and a Greer problem. Stephen Ross is much like the single guy at a bar who won't approach a woman he's attracted to because he's terrified of rejection. That's the easiest, most succinct way to explain the billionaire's hiring practices since 2009 when he became the majority owner of the South Florida NFL franchise. Remember, his first task as the Miami Dolphins majority owner was to beg Bill Parcells to stay as the franchise vice president of football operations. Parcells lasted in that role for a season and a half more, and when he left, Ross stepped out on Tony Sparano, courting Jim Harbaugh to replace a coach that he hadn't fired. The courtship led to a massive embarrassment for Ross. Harbaugh ultimately rejected him instead of choosing to join the San Francisco 49ers, and the courtship of Harbaugh created a rift between Sparano, Jeff Ireland, and the coach and general manager tandem Parcells initially installed. Those two didn't speak to each other for an entire year. Once Sparano got waxed during the 2011 season, Ross gave former Titans coach Jeff Fisher the full court press. He picked the Rams over the Dolphins, and Ross then settled for Joe Philbin, who turned out to be his worst of all hires. When it was time to get rid of Ireland after the 2013 season, Ross was forcing the next general manager to inherit Philbin because of that stance. At least three candidates, Ray Farmer, Eric DaCosta, and Nick Cassiero, turned him down. When it was time to get rid of he eventually hired Dennis Hickey, but the entire hiring process turned out to be yet another embarrassment. Then, when Ross discovered Hickey wasn't up to speed on sports science and sports analytics like he hoped, Ross hired Mike Tannenbaum as a consultant, employing the former Jets executive to build those branches of his organization. During the process of watching Tannenbaum work, Ross realized he was more qualified to lead the franchise than Hickey, and subsequently put Tannenbaum, who he initially refused to interview for the GM job, at the top of the organization, naming him vice president of football operations. A year later, Tannenbaum waxed Hickey and promotes Greer, and underlining Hickey had to be convinced not to fire the general manager role. The Dolphins hired Adam Gase in 2016 instead of sticking with Dan Campbell, the popular interim coach, who led Miami to a 5-7 record as Philbin's replacement. The Tannenbaum, Greer, and Gase era lasted 3 seasons before Gase lost the locker room. Ross got tired of losing and the constant rebuilding and waxed Tannenbaum and Gase at the same time, handing the keys over the franchise to Chris Greer. Who survived because of his collaborative nature. Greer's first hire was Brian Flores, a Bill Belichick disciple, for once Ross landed his first choice in the hiring process. Problem is, Flores spent 3 years making more enemies than allies while producing a 24-25 record, and was eventually fired by Ross for insubordination, which triggered a class action lawsuit which is still ongoing. The Dolphins then used back channels routes to hire Sean Payton, courting the recently retired New Orleans Saints coach. Miami got punished for tampering by the league and had to forfeit draft picks. The Dolphins subsequently hired Mike McDaniel who wasn't interviewed for another head coaching job position, even though 8 jobs were open in 2022. So Ross settled for the coach nobody else wanted at the time. Do you notice a trend? See the common thread? There's a lengthy trail of rejection, a history from Ross that seemingly scaring off targeted candidates, and subsequent history of painful hiring cycles. That trauma likely the reason Ross quickly decided to keep status quo in Miami for at least one more season, retraining Greer and Mike McDaniel while making it clear the bar needs to be raised. I believe in value and stability. However, continuity and leadership is not to be confused with the acceptance of the status quo is good enough, Ross said in last week's carefully worded statement announcing no changes would be made after Miami's 8-9 season. We will take a hard look at where we have fallen short and make the necessary changes to deliver our ultimate goal of building a sustaining and winning team that competes for championships. That likely means Greer and McDaniel get one more chance to build a team that will end the franchise 25-year streak of not winning a playoff game, which is the longest in professional sports. Ross will likely go over their plan with a fine-tooth comb. He knows where the shortcomings are, which are important to be aware of when it comes to finally pulling the plug. When it comes next is either winning season that produces a playoff win or a complete reset, a scorched earth restart of the Dolphins after 2025. Greer and McDaniel realize that they are each on the clock, working as a package deal, and Ross made it clear what the expectations are. It was a very disappointing year. It was hard year. A lot of lessons were learned, and unfortunately, I think sometimes you have to go through these types of seasons to take the next step. We're very committed and excited for 2025. The challenge is it's going to not be easy, but nothing worth attaining is easy. That's the article written by Omar Kelly. And now I will go ahead and also remember, guys, there's a former player, Deshaun Elliott, that said the culture was soft. Also, one of our linebackers also said that there's a lot of players that come late. They only get fined. They don't get no real repercussions. Fines to millionaires really don't mean anything unless they get cut their playing time. But now I'm going to go ahead and play the end of year press conference and then give you my thoughts on, do I think Stephen Ross is part of the problem, and can he become part of the answer if he gets rid of Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel? I'm going to play some of this and then we'll go from there.
Good. Appreciate you guys all coming today. First, I'd like to say disappointed, 8-9. That's not the standard here. It hasn't been and it won't be. We will be better, and that includes everyone from myself to my coaching staff, players. We had expectations which were created by the excitement of the last couple years, and we had hoped to continue it, and for various circumstances it didn't happen this year, and it was unacceptable. No one's happy, and we will get this fixed, very confident in our process, and looking forward to 2025 and not being out of the playoffs watching other teams play. So with that, open up you guys to questions.
As the world knows, Tyreek implied that he doesn't want to play here. Will you accommodate his desire to elsewhere in trade?
I will say Mike and I both had conversations with Tyreek here over yesterday. productive conversations. I will keep those between us. The one thing I would say is, in a frustrating season, he was very emotional in a game where we had a chance, coming back from 2-6, and I would say that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. The players and Mike and the coaching staff. We were 2-6, and we're playing Week 18 to potentially sneak in the playoffs. And I think all of that, with him playing through his injury, just kind of bubbled to a point. And from our conversations, again, we'll keep that private, but we had productive conversations.
Did I backtrack?
No, I would say, but he never asked for a trade with me.
Mike, yesterday a number of players cited concerns, including, I guess they all fall under the category of discipline. They include players showing up late for meetings and things of that nature. Do you agree that that's an issue here? And also, as head coach, what, if anything, do you plan to change in your approach to players to address it?
Yeah, I think that was the main topic of the team meeting, that you talked to them after. So it was not something that, it's almost like them bringing that up means that they understood the message. I think, myself as a head coach, you're accountable for all things, and you're adjusting as you see the team needs you to adjust. I think, it starts with me ultimately, because I'm accountable for all things on the field, specifically during the season. And I think, I'm not going to waver. I think it was very clear. I also think that, part of my motives were to make sure that without any varying confusion, that guys came to work, and once we start the phase 1 of 2025, fully knowing the expectations and how things were going to be addressed. And I think they need to you don't get anywhere if you're constantly, I can find people till they're blue in the face, I can take their money, I can yell at them, but until they understand that part of the reason that we're in the position is controllable, and we have to, with absolute certainty and zero tolerance for anything else, we have to clean the controllables up, and we can have a chance to have success together. So, there was a reason that was a overall theme for the final team meeting. And the whole key is that they understand the expectations, and that they not only understand the expectations but embrace them, which sometimes take hard lessons to do. I think there's a multitude of reasons you can go into. There's certain specific individuals that I don't think it was across the board. There was a lot of guys that had certain fines before that didn't have any. There were some people that had multiple that I think there's different ways to kind of counteract that. Bringing it up as a team and continue to fine guys wasn't enough. So I'm not going to continue to just place all blame on even some of the smallest of individuals that were multiple offenders. I'm going to adjust my process and make sure that it's team-wide knowledge. Anytime that things are done that aren't in the best interest of winning football games. So there's a bunch of different reasons. And one thing I did learn during the course of the season is that finding guys, and which I've been a part of for season after season in the National Football League, finding guys didn't particularly move the needle in the way we need to. So I'll adjust as I should as the head coach.
The Tyreek relationship with you, is that fixable?
The relationship, we met for, I want to say an hour yesterday. And I think there's the competitive spirit of his, can represent, post game, especially in a season or a game that nobody likes. It could allude to a relationship being one way. I think I was very direct with him. He was very honest, and it was great terms that we were discussing. Discussed multiple things, including without wavering, that it's not acceptable to leave the game and won't be tolerated in the future. And he embraced accountability, and it was, I wouldn't say there's anything necessarily to fix, as much as we had to clear the air in a rough and tumultuous situation.
Can you talk about the fines not being enough?
All right, guys, they spoke about finding players and also spoke about the Tyreek situation. Also spoke about trying to find offensive line players. We'll see what happens in the 2025 season. I think Ross is part of the problem of this culture being soft, just like Deshaun Elliott said. And you just heard it from Mike McDaniel that fines are not enough. Let's see if they'll fix the trenches, and let's see if they find a suitable backup, maybe even a future starter for the team. But let's see if they win in 2025 or if Ross will blow it up after 2025. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. Also, don't forget, if you want custom cups, custom keychains, or custom candles, you can check out my website at rollingwithcarlos.com, and YouTube merch will be coming soon to that website. Leave me your thoughts down below. Do you believe Stephen Ross is the problem, or can he fix it and become the answer and change the culture in Miami? Or is he part of the problem, as the culture in Miami has been soft for the last 16 years after Shula retired? Let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.